Spilimbergo Open 2024 is officially over, and our favorite Levi Rozman, as known as GothamChess, was playing his third tournament after his return to the competitive chess and also renewed road to the Grandmaster title, attempting to get the highest title in chess. We've been working together in the last couple of months, and after the tournament, I would like to pinpoint you the 10 key moments I saw in his play in the tournament. Obviously, I'm not going to pinpoint the mistakes because we are aware of what they are. I would like to show you some of the 10 best moments by Levi. So we are going to start with number 10. Here, this is his game against Levi Jarocka, young player from Poland. And already earlier, Levi showed clearly a much more mature and calm approach when it comes to decision making, and that's why I'm always very happy when, instead of rushing forward like the typical Levi 1-0 would do, for example, here something like e5, e4, or d4, or knight e5, knight g6, or queen e5. This is what the old Levi would play here, and that's why I'm always very happy to pay a lot of attention for such slow moves as h6. So h6 shows quite a deep understanding of the position because black is preparing to play e5. I mean, you could argue if this is a good idea or a bad idea, but the point is that Levi wants to play e5, and then in some lines, the bishop on f3 no longer can target opponent d5 is as much force because black cannot trade off the knight on f6, which in return guards the knight on d5. Also, there were extra ideas like to play knight e7 and bishop g5 or b6 and knight b6, but everything started with its quiet move, and I think it's worth to point it out, although it seems like a rather simple move. I think also the shared template goes to the following move here in his game against Alberto David, the last round game, which is of course going to feature in the later moments as well. And in this particular moment, you could definitely sense that Levi was looking forward for ways to crash through at the center. I mean, this is what he said himself in the recap. He was considering moves like e5 or f5, e5 here, takes, even some later positions just to try to punish his opponent. And that's why I'm very proud that he found the patience, the newfound patience to play moves like king g2. Be slow when the timing is right, improve your position, be like a snake, and don't rush when you are having a clearly dominating position. This is, I think, a major shift in his mindset, and I'm very happy to see such moments, even though, again, it's just a nice improving move to better control surrounding squares. And then in some lines, let's say you play h4, h5, something, the pawns are better protected. So the ninth moment will go to this first round game that Levi played against local player Giulio Simoni, where Levi played a very improvised opening. And why I'm showing you this game is that chess is a very concrete game, and for Levi this is a very unusual position because he had never played this particular setup before. He was improvising quite early, and that's why I think that this d5 was a very great move, and not only about the attacking ideas. It was very interesting to hear whether Levi was considering that his opponent might even sacrifice the pawn on e6 after the short castle, and he said he did sacrifice it. Like, he was not entirely sure what happens. Takes, and knight e4. Maybe, by the way, you can play knight e4 immediately, go for some domination, put the knight to f5, bishop g5. So the point here, he was considering moves like rook e6, go back. He was not sure how to evaluate. So from my as coach's perspective, this was very important to hear that he is not overly focused on the opponent's obvious response, which is the e5 push, which happened in the game. And also when we talk about the e5 push, he evaluated the consequences correctly because this is a very strategically risky move. I mean, if black is able to play knight e7, knight c5, and put the knight on c5, essentially he's going to cast a short and organize a massive pawn majority at a king size. So that's why, once again, chess sometimes is a very concrete game. So Levi played this knight e4. I mean, obviously you cannot take it. short castle. Levy played knight b5, hitting the queen and the pawn. And now after queen d7 or queen d8, okay, here Levy made a mistake of 4. I think this is something he still needs to work on, right? Because in his mindset, he very quickly discarded d4 because you can just always take the pawn, although black would have had pretty much decent position after rook e8, trade, and play moves like knight a6, knight c5, and the extra pawn doesn't even feel. So what he could have done is continue the same idea, first provoke black to play knight e8, then play a 4 with the idea to open up the position, and then you're thinking ways like sacrifice and exchange on e8 and play knight e6, or computer likes queen h5, g6, and queen h4, threatening with rook e7 or queen f4, also looks pretty okay, but either way, very, very nice, impressive way for Levy to win this game and show that sometimes the positional minuses in the position are not really that important and the game is very concrete. Number 8. This is his game against Azerbaijani young player Suleymanli Suleyman, where Levy played a very nice idea, queen e7, and clearly he had no problem sacrificing the pawn to get initiative. So the point here is that he's hitting the pawn here, and he was expecting all kinds of moves like e3 or e4, and expecting that white is going to go for a fight. So he was shocked about this trade on d5. Now the interesting thing is that he was willing to go for this position, even being down a pawn. For example, white can play queen f5, g6. I mean, you cannot take on e2 because the bishop is hanging. So g6, queen f3, you cannot take on e2 because the knight is hanging. And he was still willing to go here, and he saw some interesting ideas like knight e4, rook d8, having massive complication. I think this is one of the most important qualities if you want to become a grandmaster. So I was very happy to see that instead of this, here he could have started to worry about the pawn on d5 and retreat something like knight f6, which is exactly what his opponent wanted. So this queen e7 essentially is, I mean, not really a shift in his mindset, but I'm very happy when he makes such decisions. Actually, continuing this game here, he was considering even moves like queen e2, which just showcases he is very creative mind. For example, queen e2, queen d7, rook d8. I think normally these are the moves that we look at, but we don't seriously consider them because, for example, you take it, there's some crazy ideas like rook d1 exploit that white is completely under development, and after queen g2, rook f1, queen f1, and queen f3, there's massive threats incoming. Queen g3 is a threat, and somehow this is equal. I mean, don't ask me how this is equal, it's just insane. So Levy played knight f6. Okay, maybe again the lesson, the takeaway here is that he could have played for dynamics, knight e4, which looks pretty interesting, but okay, you can't really blame queen e2. He got a slightly better position, but ultimately was unable to win the game, and the game finished in a draw. Number 7 is this game that he played against the young Indian Shaik Arsh. And you know, I saw some recaps where rook takes on a6 was obviously criticized for not being played. I'm not sure I agree. I think that Levy here made a very brave choice by not sacrificing his beloved rook, because this would have been for him pure content. Because imagine this, Levy is well known for his exclamation mark, he sacrificed the rook, right? And what's not better than to sacrifice the rook, you know? And then play knight c7, king d7, and knight a8. So the thing is, actually, this is not so simple because black plays moves like bishop b4. Okay, engine says rook g1 here. I'm not entirely sure. Rook g1, rook g4. How obvious is this? But probably bishop a6, knight f6. Let's say, yeah, rook g1, g6. I'm not sure how real is white advantage here. So black just plays at some point a5, and it feels it's pretty close to level position. So white's gonna play bishop d2, bishop c3, king d2, and rook a1. But you can understand that Levy was not sure about this. Yes, maybe, you know, maybe from a practical point of view, he had to go here because what he got in the game was not very inspiring. But what I want to pinpoint is this mature choice for not going for the obvious continuation just because it's a sacrifice and thinking about the larger picture. Now, that's what I really like it. And even though objectively maybe rook a6 is better, I think this is something that Levy 1-0 would never do. Number 6 is Levy's game against Anaye Ortiz Verdezotto. So here he played a very interesting opening, which was part of a larger prep, and his opponent played bishop b5 check. You might be wondering what's wrong with bishop d7, trade pieces, etc. But the thing is, after bishop d7 and takes, the position is pretty simple. Levy said himself after knight e5 he was afraid of queen a4 check, and the king is kind of in trouble. He didn't see physically queen b5 because the knight is pinned, and white is not having any advantage here. But again, you have to give a big compliment for Levy's creativity here, because he actually played king e7. You know, I was so stunned when I saw this, when I was looking during the live transmission, because I was doing the coverage on Levy's Twitch and YouTube channels. I was considering only king f8, g6, and king g7, make artificial castle and avoid the bishop trade. Maybe the question is why the bishop trade is a good idea to avoid, because you want to use the bishop on b5 as a target, which follows the rule. You don't want to trade your opponent's targets, you want to conquer them. So Levy played this king e7 not just because he's a big fan of the bank cloud and he's seeking the content. It was a very practical choice. He thought after queen a5 he's going to apply some pressure here and maybe in complications take over the game. So the game did finish in a draw in the end, even though Levy had very nice winning chances, but this kind of decision clearly shows very good thinking outside of the box. Number 5 was Levy's game against Stefano Gonzalez Maldonado, the young Italian player. And in the opening, Levy suffered, so he did not really play it out well. At some point later, he was coming back where the young Italian was becoming pretty passive. And the moment I would like to pinpoint here is that the position seems to be pretty deadlocked. But what you don't see is the back story, what happened before, because a couple of moves ago, Stefano started to become very passive and clearly trying to hold on to the position, and he was also positioning all the pawns on the color of his own dark of a bishop, which is not a good idea in an endgame. So Levy here charged forward and he played a5. Objectively, this is nothing. So basically, black needs to do is do nothing. Just stand, put the rook on b7, bishop f8, rook e7, build a brick wall. Nothing is going to happen, and white's double pawns to the king side don't really help him have any realistic chances to break through. Anyway, the young Italian played a6, and actually I felt this was an opportunity for Levy. So did he as well. And he played this very beautiful concept. I just want to show you this. You could argue maybe it was a bit flawed. Maybe he could have done it slightly differently. I'm going to talk about it. So he played rook a1 with the idea that after b takes on a5, he didn't take the pawn on a5. He actually played king b3. So with the idea that after the obvious rook e to b8, he played king a4. And after a takes, c takes, black is up a pawn. But if somebody is playing this position for the win, it's only white. How comes? Because the king on a4 is an extra piece. So Levy used the king as something that you don't have to protect. But in endgames, it's essentially a piece, because look at this king on f7. It's so far away from the action. So for example, the young Italian could have played something like c4 here, try to activate the bishop. But again, I mean, there could be moves like rook d1 and bishop b4 quite is not going to work. Rook d2, rook d7. The pawn on a5, we would call this in chess an umbrella. It shelters the king from the check. So black eventually collapsed and very quickly Levy won the game. So maybe Levy could have improved the idea here. Instead of rook a1, he could have played king b3 immediately. Maybe this was the slightly better idea, because the point is that after b takes on a5, he plays king a4, and the rook on a1 doesn't do anything. After a takes on b5, he can play c takes on b5, and again b takes is king a4, and then black plays c4 check. Well, here again, I think white has some opportunities like king a4 or king c4 probably even is a move. So anyway, still beautiful idea, and this is one of the most memorable moments for Levy in Spilimbergo Open Tournament. Number 4 is Levy's game against Nikhil, the surprising Indian player who was clearly underrated. He was rated 2198, and yet 2 rounds before the end of the tournament, he was clearly fighting for an IM Nork. He was beating 2300 guys left and right. So it quite didn't feel fair that Levy is playing against clearly underrated player, but it is what it is. So the game was pretty crazy. Levy at some point had a better game, mostly after the opening. Then the Indian was striking back, and we came to this critical moment. Now, this is something probably which is going to haunt Levy, but I would still like to use this as one of the moments of Spilimbergo Open because this was a very valuable lesson. Black to play and draw. So clearly Black is at a disadvantage here. White has an outside pass pawn at the king side. This is very often something that White can use to push Black to focus on the pawn so that White in the meantime can use the H pawn as a bait and capture everything that Black has at the queen side. So apparently Levy still had a draw here, which was the fascinating F5 check, which maybe is nothing else. But here, unfortunately, with only 4 minutes on the clock, it's all about either you see it or you don't. Now the question is, would you, dear viewers, find the absolutely stunning idea of bishop takes on h4? So the idea is after king takes on h4, Black plays king d5, king c6, plays b5, and so you notice this bishop is the wrong corner with this pawn. Now you might be asking, what does it mean? This is a very famous exception to the endgames. This is a theoretical draw. For example, b takes, you put the king here. Even if White wins the pawn and White is going to win the pawn, you can never win this position because Black keeps the king on a8 and the game is going to end with a stalemate. So if White will take on b5, instead of king e6 takes b5, a4 is happening. White cannot keep this b4 pawn alive because these pawns eventually will be traded one after another. And we just sold bishop. It's impossible to win the game. Yeah, it was a very fascinating concept, and I would again say either you see it, either you don't. Obviously, Levy was very unhappy about missing this opportunity. He played bishop e7, and then he lost the game. But still, very important lesson to be learned that sometimes these bishop endgames, you have to remember that the wrong corner of your opponent's bishop might be a key resource to save the game. Number 3 was Levy's game against Zeneli, this crazy game which actually could be done like in 10 parts. Levy's immortal game. Here, the Albanian player just played knight e6 earlier and he was applying some pressure on the long diagonal. And Levy famously took his playing style, sacrificed the exchange. Now that's what I wanted to mention. Here, obviously, he has different moves as well. He could have played like h3, protect the pawn on g4. This was not a requirement, but it was a very nice signature move of Levy's creative playing style. So he sacrificed the exchange on a1. He's down material, but Black has problems with his piece coordinations, and also these pawns are weaknesses. So Levy will play this another beautiful move, queen e4, centralizing the queen. And then eventually he was getting already technically winning position. What happened in the game later, this is the moment number 2 actually. Because now we go to the later part of the game when Clendy was fighting back and he reached the following position. Levy had misplayed. So here he played knight d5, which seems to be a nice idea. He tries to close the d file. By the way, the knight on a7 is under attack. You cannot take it immediately because the rook on d3 is going to capture the knight on d2. So knight d5 was a nice concept. The thing is, bishop d5 seemed to be like a mistake, and chess.com engines were saying that this is a mistake. However, here the Albanian played the shocking move knight c6, and suddenly Levy realized, oh my goodness, he can't protect the knight on d2. And if he takes on c6, Black now connects the rooks. He takes on d2, and even more, he's threatening to deliver a mate. Q&A check is nothing. It just allows Black to play king g7. Everything is starting to fall apart. So here, Levy probably played one of the most famous ideas that he ever has played in his career. Could have been the top choice, but I left the top choice for something else. He decided to take on c6, rook d2, and queen d2. Sacrifice the queen. I don't really know how many queen sacrifices Levy has had in his chess career so far, but this definitely is one of the most memorable ones. Now the point is, after c takes on b7, suddenly White has 4 passed pawns. That is backed by a very powerful bishop. And if somebody's playing this position for the win, it's only white. So apparently here the best move for black is to play queen e1, bishop f1 on queen b4. I mean, this move is pretty logical to dislaunch the bishop so that the pawn is under attack. And if white plays something like c6, black is rushing forward with moves like e5, e4, e3. And already at some point, white needs to be a bit careful, because if the king gets exposed, black gets a lot of checks. So the game could finish at some point with bishop b5, queen e1, bishop f1, queen b4, etc. So very, very sharp endgame. But it was quite difficult for Kalendi to pick this up. So he played the human move queen d1. And after king h2, now you see white is not obliged to play bishop f1. I suppose this is what Kalendi missed. He was expecting only bishop f1. And suddenly after king h2, there's no more checks on d6. The bishop on g2 now still protects the pawn on b7. And here, Kalendi decided not to take the pawn on b3, with the idea that white simply charges forward, c7 has to be stopped, a5, you cannot take an a5 b pawn advances, king g1 here, and black is just not in time to stop these pawns. Look at this. Now you see the pawn on b7 is protected by the bishop, and there's no check, no nothing. I mean, black just loses. So Kalendi here decided to play queen d8, and now this move Levy could have cost his victory. He played b4, the position still remained very sharp. Well, apparently he was not sure what happens after a5. I think this move had to be played because this was essentially a race. You cannot play queen a5 because this pawn promotes. Queen b8, check, king g1, and only now, after a6, king e8, Levy had to continue with the move b4. Now, this is what he explained himself. King d7, b5, b6, c6. I mean, this is just absurd. Or even a7. How often do you see that 4 pawns are clearly dominating your opponent's queen? It's just unheard of. So what happened in the game is that Levy played b4. At some point, there was a perpetual check. Black missed it. And in the end, it was the Albanian young player who made the final mistake. A very complex position. Here he should have played queen e1 with the draw, he played queen e3, and ultimately Levy found a way to escape the checks, and he won the game. Very beautiful one. And finally, top 1 moment of the tournament, obviously, is Levy's last round game against the only grandmaster he faced in the tournament. Unfortunately, he didn't get any more because he had not really a perfect start. So before the game, he was very, very happy to get his chance to play another grandmaster. His opponent was Alberto David, 3-time Italian champion, very expensive player, a guy who has been over 2600 elo. Actually, his actual rapid rating is over 2600. That's all you need to know. He's been playing for Team Luxembourg for many years. He watched us Olympiads on top board, so clearly a professional of many years of experience. So Levy played a beautiful game, and quite early Alberto started to improvise, probably at the wrong moment, and when Levy had a clearly dominating position, here he decided to open up the center and play e5. Alright, I mean, here the engine says he could have played bishop takes on f6, g takes on f6, and now play e5, with ideas like bishop g6 and knight f6, and engine really likes it. But e5 is also pretty human, because he has all the pieces perfectly ready here, and he's just opening the position. So he was mainly expecting f takes, so let's say something like d takes. He can't take on e5, he can't take on g6, he can't play h4, h5. Many continuations here are really looking great for him. And here the Italian player made immediate mistake. He played queen c8, trying to change something in the game, and now here Levy immediately finished the game in style. So he played bishop g6, bishop h3, king h2, and knight f6, a beautiful sacrifice. So apparently here there was a curious moment when Levy played the so-called pen gambit after executing knight f6 or bishop g6, whichever move it was. His pen went flying and these 2 pawns disappeared from the board. So actually it was caught on the camera. I did not notice this during the broadcast, but clearly Levy was a bit embarrassed. But it was a funny moment, and they restored the position. So the point here is that queen g6 is incoming, and there's nothing that black can do. I mean, he has to take on g6, bishop f1 just loses, bishop h7, rook f1, followed by knight h4, knight g6, g takes on f6. 2 minor pieces for the rook is just decisive. So knight f6, and here the Italian tried to play the final chance, meaning he took on f6 and played king f8. So his idea was that e takes on f6, he wants to play queen g4, stopping queen g7 mate. And if Levy would be very ambitious and play knight g5 and queen g7, rook e2 check still gives black apparently a draw. So takes, king h3, and here apparently the very precise knight g5 check, king h4, and queen h2 check, king g4, queen h3, king g5, queen g3, king f5, queen e3, and it's a draw. It's just mind-boggling draw. But to be honest, it just makes no sense. Why would Levy want to go here? So instead, Levy just decided to play cool. He played queen g7, no funny business. He does need to checkmate immediately, and this forced opponent resignation. Why is this? Because after queen takes and king g8, the bishop on h3 drops. White now has 2 extra pawns at the king side with a weak king. Talk about f5, f6, g4, g5, g6, or knight h4, knight f5. At the professional level, such positions are not being played on, and the 3-time Italian champion had to capitulate. So overall, it was a fantastic tournament. Important lessons were learned that we have to improve on some of the key moments. Still, I would rate the tournament as a success due to these lessons, because rating-wise, Levy got only 0.2 rating, which is basically staying at his rating, which is 2370. No grumps or norms were acquired in this tournament, but the experience was, and Levy will attempt to give it another try at the end of August in New York GM Norm tournament, which is going to be a round robin tournament. So the viewers, thank you for watching Spilimbergo Open. Hope you enjoyed these top 10 moments, and we're going to continue working with Levy and make sure that he's going to get a Grandmaster title. Stay tuned.